Hello and welcome to Digital Photo Academy. My name is Asif Raza. We start off with an introduction to the Photoshop interface. So when you first install and open Photoshop, your window may look something like this. And by the way, this is reflecting Photoshop CC21, the cloud version. And I'm going to begin explaining the different aspects of it. So if your window looks like this, wonderful. If it doesn't look like this, it may end up looking like this. And all it is doing is literally showing the Photoshop interface. So if you notice at the top left, there's a little home button. When you click on it, that's when it can swap between the two interfaces. So it shows Welcome to Photoshop because I'm subscribed to the cloud version. To further and better explain, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and open an image so that there's something visually interesting on the screen as opposed to a blank screen. So to open an image, we have multiple options. We can go into File and open an image from here, and then you can direct it to the appropriate directory wherever your images may reside. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is, notice in the alternate screen startup, you have an open button over here, or there's a large window which says drag and drop an image, and that will also end up opening up your image file. So what I'm going to do is simply drag and drop an image in here and see how it behaves. So I simply dragged and dropped, and the image shows up on screen. And by default, whatever the image dimensions, whatever the resolution, it will by default fill up the entire screen space that you have on your desktop. Now that we have an image available, we can reduce or enlarge the image any which way that we want. But before we get on with the image details and all those wonderful things, allow me to explain at least what the interface is about. So first and foremost, the central space, which is the largest space where the image resides, is the image window. And you will notice that this little tab up there gives me the file name, what format it is, what the relative magnification is at this point, what the color mode is, RGB, and what bit rate it is. And we're going to discuss all of these things in later videos. Then on the left-hand side, you see this little narrow bar, which is referred to as the toolbar. Now, the toolbar, generally, when you start off, comes stuck to Photoshop's window all the way to the left. And there are many different tools in here, which we'll talk about later. But the important thing to recognize is any tool, and for the sake of convenience, there's a little tiny dotted line. I'm going to pull the toolbar in the middle of the frame so that you can perhaps see it a little better. Any tool which has a little triangle on the bottom right implies that there are additional tools within this tool. So to be able to see the additional tool, it's fairly simple. You simply keep it depressed and it shows up the additional tools that may reside within that framework. For example, here's a rectangular dotted line, which is also referred to as the rectangular marquee. So I keep it depressed and then let go, and I then can make a choice of whether I want the rectangular marquee, the elliptical, the single row, the single column marquee. So similarly, just keep in mind that any tool that has a little triangle at the bottom right will have additional tools beneath that, just the same way that here's a blur, sharpen, and smudge tool. Okay, and you also have the ability over here to keep this toolbar as a single column or as a two column. So you notice the tiny arrows pointing to the right, the two arrows. If you click on this, this takes on a two column format. So whatever that suits your purposes, your personal work, you do that. So this is the toolbar. Then beyond the toolbar, we have what is known as the second most important aspect of Photoshop, the options bar. In the options bar, what happens is every tool has various options to it. And the moment you click on any tool, the options up there will change. For example, if you keep an eye on just the tool menu options at the top, I'll change my tool and you notice that the options evolve. And if I go change it again, I took a brush tool and all the options evolve. And then these options have additional controls built into them. So this is the options bar. And then on the right hand side, you have the panels. And you may notice that there may be multiple tabs in each one. And the idea is that any tab that you're interested in that particular panel, you simply click on that, and that tab and that panel then opens up. Just the way there's properties over here, adjustments over here, and libraries here. So all of these are variables. Now, you can expand or collapse these. So if I am not interested in seeing all these panels, I simply come to the arrows pointing to the right and it collapses itself. And now it becomes available to me through an icon representation with the text available. Similarly, here's a history panel. I can click on it and it opens up. When I'm done with it, I can simply collapse it either by clicking on this little icon directly or on this two arrows on the right hand side. Beyond this, there are additional options that are embedded in this tiny little lines that you see, the 4 lines, and you can do additional things, and different panels will have different options available to them. So we've talked about the primary window, the image window. We've talked briefly about the toolbar over here. And the one thing I forgot to mention on the toolbar is that if you hover your tool over the actual tool, it gives you a very good indicator of what this tool is about. For example, this is the move tool. And let's say if I go to this tool, it tells me it's the crop tool. And the best part about it is that if I go and change my tool to a perspective tool, and let's bring it back, it actively gives me information relative to the active tool at that point in time. So this is a quick way of also understanding what each tool is about. The other thing that you will notice is where it says move tool in this visual, within brackets there's an alphabet. That particular alphabet happens to be a quick reference to the keyboard shortcut to that particular tool. So if you were to hit V on the keyboard, then guess what? Irrespective of what tool you have, it'll be the move tool that will be selected. So for example, currently, let's say I am in the eyedropper tool and I decide that I want to move something and I want the move tool available. So all I have to do is hit V on the keyboard, and that's what I did, and this became active. Now these keyboard shortcuts to access the tools are completely common between a Windows platform or a Mac platform. Everything that we have talked about is totally common between the two platforms, so you don't need to worry about whether you're working on a Mac or a PC. The interface is exactly the same. Then one more. Right at the bottom of the screen, you will notice that it shows me a value over here, which is a percentage value. It's basically showing me the same information that it's showing in the tab at the top, which is the magnification. So if I wanted, I could come here, select that, and type in a different number, and then hit enter, and the image enlarges to that percentage value. That's another way of magnifying or reducing the image to a smaller or larger scale. But the more important one is the one next to it. And you notice there's a tiny arrow here. And if I click on it, then I have a choice of looking at a different assortment of information that is related to my image that's on display. document size, document profile, measurement scale, scratch sizes, layer count, and all those wonderful things. And these are bits of information that become important. One can reflect on and decide. So if I wanted to see what color profile I'm using in this image, all I have to do is click on the document profile, let go, and it shows me exactly what my profile is. If I wanted to see, hey, what are my dimensions on the actual image file, I do that, and I've set my preferences so it shows me in inches, which is 15 point something by 10 point something at 300 pixels per inch. So this is another part of information that is available to you through here. And finally, at the top, you have the menus. So there's a subtle difference here between the Windows platform and the Mac platform, Photoshop. And I'll explain that very quickly. So these menus, if you click on any one, they have a whole bunch of sub commands in here. And what you should pay attention to, because Photoshop is a complex application, it's not easy, and there's a lot of things that you need to do reasonably efficiently. You notice that across some of the commands there are shortcuts. So I'm on a Mac platform, so if I wanted to create a new document, I could either click in here, or without clicking in there, I could do a Command N. Similarly, wherever you see, you have shortcuts available. On a Windows platform, the command generally, in most cases, gets replaced by the Control key. So just remember that. And on a Windows platform, you will, as opposed to a Command key, you will see a Control command over here. Control N, Control O, or Shift Control O, or Control W, and so on and so forth. And lastly, when you're looking up here, there's the search icon. So if you click in here, you can actively search directly within the Photoshop space or the Photoshop server, because this is all cloud-based. So if I wanted to look for a particular bit of information or a lesson or whatever, I can simply type in here and it'll take me to that. So this is an important button over here. This is what you call the help button. This is the different workspaces that are available to us. We'll talk about that in a separate video. And this little icon over here, which is a rectangle with an arrow on it, if you were to click on it, you can directly send an image from here to a particular size through an email, or add it to somewhere, or whatever you may wish to do. Not very commonly used by me or many people, because there are better and more efficient ways of doing that. This is the basic Photoshop interface.